Thank you for tuning in. You're watching Next Big Thing. I'm your host, Attila. And of course, thank you for supporting us. And of course, thank you for always tuning in this time every week live to watch us here on Think Tech in our downtown studio here in beautiful Honolulu. Every week we have some interesting guest, someone who's doing something interesting and important, and who wants to share their vision or their idea with the world. And that's what we want to do on the show. With us this week is, of course, someone who needs no introduction, Burt Lum. He's with Bytemarks Cafe, and he's a famous fellow, I guess.
Geek?
Yes, there you go.
Yeah, famous geek. I'll
famous
claim
geek.
it. Yeah.
And he's agreed to come on, and we're going to talk about Unconferenz, this really cool conference that's coming up in March, I believe. It's
March 1st.
March 1st. It's a cool tech conference here in Hawaii. We're going to talk about open data, and we're even going to talk about the Civic Accelerator, that new project you're working on. So thanks so much for joining us here in the studio.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate it, and it's good to meet you finally in person.
Well, I think I've kind of kept track of some of the things that Jay's been doing and Think Tech and all the sort of the media assets that he has, and it's pretty impressive. So, I'm glad I finally made it to this level.
Well, we're glad that we were able to merge. How's that?
Yeah.
And have you on. So what is Unconferenz? Tell me all about it. What are you doing?
This actually kind of happened about 7 years ago. And I've been doing these sort of Bytemarks lunches. And what happened was Bytemarks lunch, we invite some of the geeks in town and we get together. And this happened started in like early 2000. And we were just sitting around a table talking story. And then one of the ideas was, hey, why don't we do something different? Let's do a little event, like a conference, but something different. And so we were tossing around some ideas and some models of what that might look like. And one of the things that we started to become very interested in is something called Food Camp, which is the Friends of O'Reilly. And that's Tim O'Reilly in the Bay Area. And that is kind of an exclusive by invitation only. So there's the Food Camp model. And then because a lot of people weren't getting invited to Food Camp because it was invitation only, what we ended up doing was, there was also in the Bay Area, what happened was there was another sort of unconference format called Bar Camp.
Bar Camp? That sounds
For
like
Bay Area,
fun.
Yeah, Bay Area camp, right? So it was more open to a lot of people, and people were able to come. And the idea was that it's participant driven. So anybody who comes can suggest a topic for a session. And what happens is that if you come in the morning, there's the opportunity to suggest topics. And for the first maybe 45 minutes, the topics are kind of laid out on the table. So all the people that start to come, they go and look at what topics are being suggested and actually put maybe a little like a red sticky on it to kind of vote for which topics they're most interested in. So now you have topics and you have participant-driven topics, you have people voting on those topics, and you have a sense of what might be of interest to talk about. And then those topics get put up on a grid. So this grid is typically, for us, it's the number of rooms that you have. So in our case, it's 3 rooms, and then the number of time slots that you might have. So, you might have one session going from 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12, lunch break, and then another one at 1 to 2, 2 to 3. So you go 5 times 3, that's 15 sessions. So you get your topics, and then you put them up on the grid. And then now you have the topics and where to go to gather up the people who want to talk about that particular subject. So that's basically how the Unconferenz gets started. And it's an interesting dynamic because what happens is that there's an element of chaos that gets introduced to this process.
And Post-its just seem so low tech. Considering it's a tech conference, you'd think people just tweet about which one they want to see more, right?
Well,
Yeah.
so the the stickers are just circular, the round colored stickers,
Yeah.
and then the
garage
the
sale
actual
stickers,
right,
yeah.
right, and then the pages that we might print the topics are just 8.5 by 11. Okay. The thing that's interesting is that as we might consider ourselves sort of the tech geeks, but people want to physically do stuff, right? They don't necessarily want to just tweet about it. So part of the beauty of the unconference is that people have to get up and do something, right? They have to get up and take that colored sticky and actually vote on a topic. And when you have a table like this, and it's covered with topics, and you have a mass of people coming up there and looking at the topic titles and trying to decide, which one do I vote on? And they're all sort of massed, huddled around this table. That sense of chaos is kind of an interesting dynamic. So, what the beauty of the unconference is that it can be, you can have the spectrum, right? You can have a conference that's totally organized and predetermined, and then you can have a total unconference which is undetermined, and that's total chaos. What we try to do is we actually try to find a little balance between total chaos and complete organization. So what we do is we actually have the since we've been doing it for 7 years, we've introduced the ability to to pick and actually to put your own topic up. So there's a site that you can go to and you can link to it. I have it on the unconference.com site. So there's ideas. And if you, over the course of the time when we announced the unconference, which we announced back in December of last year. So we announced it to everybody, unconference coming up, the date is it's March 1st, Saturday, March 1st. So from that point on, they can start voting, or they can actually start suggesting. They suggest topics. So they can go to the website, suggest topics. So we actually have a list of topics. And so you can actually vote on those topics now. But then at the actual event, you kind of vote again. But we sort of know which ones are going to be popular because of the votes that have already taken place online. So we've already been accumulating input from the folks that are interested in coming. They've already been starting to put up topics, and they've actually started voting on those topics.
And so who puts on the presentation?
Okay, see, that's another beauty, right? So there is no presentation per se. We sit around the table, everybody is equal. There's no, I'm more expert than you are. It's more of a peer-to-peer interaction. So it's more participatory. So if we were sitting around a table, and let's say hypothetically, we wanted to, talk about open data, I would have maybe some perspective, some insight into open data. You might have some questions about open data, and our interaction, and amongst whoever shows up, so it might be anywhere from a dozen to 2 dozen people, we will have a sort of group discussion about what interests them. So it's less about a presentation, it's more about a participation, an interaction, a dialogue amongst the people that have come to this sort of gathering.
This sounds kind of traditional too. Isn't this the way that traditional societies used to sit around and come to decisions? That get people together in one circle who are interested in, agriculture, and then decide how they would, the tribe would take care of agriculture, and now we're just bringing it to tech, right?
For me, the topic tends to be around technology, but you're absolutely right. In a lot of traditional cultures, there's a, sit around the circle.
Yeah.
They might actually pass a talking stick or something, right? So I've seen places where they can actually, if you have a talking stick, it's your thing to talk, right? And if you're done talking, then you pass the talking stick, to the next person. And we've incorporated some of that in some of our Bytemarks lunches and things like that. But for the sort of unconference session, it's probably a little bit more, because you might have a couple dozen people. What we will do is we'll maybe do an introduction. So we'll just say, hey, everybody, go around and take 5 seconds and introduce, what's your name, what's your interests, maybe where you're from or whatever, like what organization are you from. And then it's sort of opened up to a dialogue. Now the key finesse is finding people that are kind of subject matter experts in the area, so they can perhaps help not only answer some of the questions, but help facilitate the conversation. So it's really important is that you might have multiple people talking, or you might have the conversation start to steer off in a particular direction. There are people that have gone to unconferences that we've put on, and know that there's a certain element of facilitation that needs to take place. And if you need to kind of inject and say, oh, we need to get this kind of back on track, or maybe this is going a little bit, maybe off topic, then you can bring it back on track. It's part of that dynamic is really understanding what is it, how are the people sort of reacting to this conversation, right? I mean, two guys might go into a dialogue, and maybe that dialogue becomes very specific to whatever they're talking about. And if you start to lose everybody else, then it's a good signal to maybe bring it back to a more general conversation.
And so what comes out of these things? Do people just get to know each other better? Is there social change happening?
Well, that's a good question. What the goal of the Unconference is really kind of all about is to try to be a catalyst for something to happen. And because you're bringing people together, and there's interest in a topic, and there's an opportunity to maybe get a question answered, there might be a subject matter expert there. What we're trying to do is we're trying to bring people together to facilitate kind of interaction. And I'll give you some examples. About maybe 4 years ago, we had the Unconference. One of the topics was co-working. And we, again, opened it up. Everybody who's interested in talking about co-working, come and let's sort of have a conversation about it. So there were a number of people who were very interested in co-working, and they wanted to find out more about the dynamics of co-working, the business models of co-working, who actually benefits from creating a co-working space. That was discussed within the framework of like sort of this 50-minute to a 1-hour session. But what was really kind of neat to see happen was that they continued to have that conversation outside of the Unconference. So they got a chance to meet people, they got a chance to maybe exchange some contact info, they had a chance to gauge each other's level of interest in moving something forward, and they took it upon themselves to meet outside of the Unconference. And now we see a bunch of co-working spaces, especially in Kaka'ako. Another example which we hope to see happen, and it's kind of blossoming, is this idea of maker spaces. So last year, it was something that was talked about. Let's see if we can get a maker fair, or let's see what we can do about creating a maker movement here in Hawaii. So at last year's Unconference, we had it as a topic. I put the word out, if you guys want to come together and talk about makers and maker spaces, come to the Unconference. We had representatives that came from the neighbor islands, from Big Island, Maui, and Oahu. We had good maker representation, and they came together and they were sort of brainstorming the idea of whether or not a maker fair could actually be pulled off in Hawaii. And I'm happy to say that on March 15th, there's going to be a mini maker fair that kind of got its start from gathering up at the Unconference and talking about how can we do this. So they gathered up, they took names, they got contact info, they got commitments on the part of whoever came and said, okay, well, I'll do this or I'll do that. And they sort of stayed in touch over the course of the last year. Now, it doesn't happen by any prescriptive manner, right? So this is not something that just happens because I say it should happen or anybody else. I mean, it has to kind of naturally happen by itself. So in any kind of effort, there needs to be like a key sort of driver, like a leader, somebody that takes kind of the ball and run with it, right? And the maker movement, I mean, there were some key people that came to the table and said, hey, you know, I'm interested in doing it. But once they started to actually try to organize, the key was, okay, so who's going to take the lead? Who's going to actually do the hard work of organizing people, bringing them together, you know, whatever business model you want to try to create, whether it's going to be a nonprofit or it's a for-profit or what, you have to do the administrative part of, you know, pulling that all together.
You have to do the hard work. That's the thing.
Yeah, right. And somebody's got to lead it, right?
Well, we got to run to a quick break. I want to talk a little bit more about this, but we'll be right back. I'm your host, Attila here with Burt Lum, and of course, we're talking about Unconferenz coming up in March next Saturday. I guess next Saturday. Yeah, great. So tune in. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Castle & Cook, Hawaii. Investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state. Collateral Analytics. Empowering the real estate industry to make better informed property investment decisions. The Foreign Trade Zone. Bringing the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone programs to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. Galen Ho, a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company. Hawaiian Electric Company and its affiliates Maui Electric and Hawaii Electric Light Company on Hawaii Island. The Hawaii Energy Policy Forum, incorporating diverse perspectives to design a flexible and forward-looking energy strategy. Hawaii Energy, the state's energy and efficiency program created to help Hawaii's residents and businesses adopt a clean energy lifestyle. Hawaii Gas, helping Hawaii achieve its transition to clean energy and a better energy future. Hawaii Pacific Health, bringing technology and teamwork together to transform healthcare in Hawaii. The High Tech Development Corporation, attached to DBED, is the state's leading technology agency. The Scheidler Family Foundation, supporting educational, cultural, and charitable organizations, including think tank.
We're back, we're live, and you're watching Think Tech. I'm your host, Attila Ceres. On our show today, Next Big Thing, we're talking about Unconferenz with a local celebrity, Burt Lum. Thank you for joining us in the studio, Burt.
Oh, happy to, happy that you invited me.
Well, that's cool stuff. And of course, with Unconferenz, it seems like a more traditional get-together gathering, and it's funny. I don't know. Did you watch the Jerry Seinfeld bit when Jimmy Fallon took over the just the other night, and he was talking about how everyone just wants to have one-sided conversations, texting. They'll just say, all right, here's everything I have to say, and off, right? But getting people in a little circle like this and really asking them their opinion, belly button to belly button, right?
Right.
It's a whole different story.
Well, and we don't want to lose the ability for people to talk face to face, just like we're kind of doing here.
Yeah.
And you get the dynamic of my facial expressions or my expression, how I'm articulating stuff.
That's a lot of work. I can just text that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. It's hard. I mean, you can misinterpret things from text.
Sure.
So if you
Spell
have
check,
people-to-people conversations, I think it's really good. But this is not, as much as it might sound like a kind of a low-tech event, there are elements to it that are leveraging the technology, right? So ideas, as an example, the ideas have been used to kind of pre-stage what it is that we're going to talk on in terms of the topics. That's leveraging things like a site called User Voice. So we've used that, and that's where you can actually put your ideas and vote for them. Of course, we're using the web quite extensively. We're using sites like like Eventbrite to register for the event. The other thing that we're trying to do, and I've experimented with different ways of trying to do this, but I find that it's important to actually try to capture the notes from a session, because
like meeting notes.
Yeah, like meeting notes, because what you want to do is you want to actually have the ability to if an idea gets shared, or if there's some some interesting things that get talked about, or maybe there's some contact information that once you want to put out there. How do you capture the notes from the sessions? Now, okay, the low-tech way was, I kind of started off by getting maybe some volunteers to go and take notes, right? So they go in there and they're taking notes, and some of them might be handwriting them, some of them might be typing it in. Okay, that's fine. But once they go home and they have to actually get it back to me, if they hand wrote it, they would have to transcribe it, right? And of course, that's going to take them time because they might have a life and they might not want to spend time transcribing their notes in a electronic format, so it might take a while. Okay, so that seemed to have a bit of a delay and a little bit of
they don't have a smart pen.
wrangling. Okay, well you got to figure it out. We started 7 years ago, so there weren't smart pads. And then the other thing I tried to do is maybe I encourage to bring your laptop or bring your smart device. The other thing that I tried to do is create a kind of a Google form that they can actually type in some quick notes. Okay, so that was marginal. But what I am going to try to do in this unconference is basically create a Google Doc that's publicly accessible. And then I did a URL shortener. So it's very, very easy. It's like a bit.ly, like bit.ly. And then the URL is pretty straightforward. What we'll do is we'll number all the sessions. So if we have 15, we'll have numbers 1 through 15, and then the URL will reflect a number that corresponds to the session. And that way, if you come to a session and you feel compelled to maybe take some notes or drop some notes in there, or maybe put some contact info, you can open up your browser, go to this URL, this bit.ly site. It just basically transfers it over to the Google Doc, and then you can type in your notes. So hopefully what I'm trying to do is crowdsource the notes live.
Oh, I see. So
session.
everyone can contribute to one Google Doc, and it kind of puts it all together?
No, I actually have 15 Google Docs. So each...
for each session?
Each session, yeah. So it's numbered 1 through 15. I might have a couple extra ones just for the sake of having a couple of overflow sessions or whatever. But the idea is that if you can go to the doc and for session 1, you can go to one doc, type in your notes, now it's there. And I could potentially crowdsource the amount of participants to contribute to that Google Doc. And that way, at least we have some capture of some of the ideas that might have come out of that session.
You may have some redundancy, though. That's the concern.
I'd rather have redundancy than nothing.
Or nothing. Yeah, I guess you're right about that.
Right. So I mean, if you went in and I went in and we were both amazed at this one comment or maybe this idea, and we both typed it in. Hey, better than not having any recollection of that idea, right?
Plus, it's also time sensitive that way, right? Because you can.
It's live. It's right there, right? So and then if you have to go home and think about, which session did I go and what did I hear in that session? You might mix up all the sessions, right? It's easy to do, right? You go to conferences these days. You go to let's say you go to 4 or 5 sessions in a day. By the end of the day, you haven't, it's like brain overload.
Gone,
yeah.
It's interesting though, because that reminds me of a lot of students in college, particularly when I went to college, were all about the laptops. They're always taking notes on laptops, and that's a personal preference. But I found that a lot of times having that technology served to be a distraction
from actually
paying attention.
Yeah.
So it turned into more about how do we get the formatting right, rather than how is it that we're going to get this idea, some fertilizer. How are we going to get it some seed? How are we going to get it some traction? So I wonder if I like the original handwriting for better memory retention, but probably not the best for long term. There's a trade-off.
Yeah.
It's
and
difficult.
then that's true. The beauty of this is that it's somewhat iterative. So we can try different things, and if it works, it does. We can sort of adapt over time. The thing that I was thinking about was that, whenever you go to a conference or a session or what have you, there's going to be people that want to talk and they're talking, and there's people that kind of want to listen and they are maybe taking a more passive involvement with the actual session. So I would try to encourage those guys that they can still participate by capturing some notes. So maybe the guys that are less inclined to speak up and say something, they can go ahead and take notes. But I will see how it goes and see what kinds of what ideas get posted up on the Google Docs.
Have you thought of doing some video streaming?
Well, video streaming is always something that we're interested in doing, and it's something that requires a lot of equipment. And of course, just looking at all the equipment that's located over here, it not only requires equipment, but it requires the lighting that we have here, the miking, and the internet connection, and people to actually administer the stream, right? So people to actually work the cameras, work the hardware. So it becomes a little bit potentially cost prohibitive. Now I could beg Jay to maybe come over and do something, but
I'm sure he's listening. Maybe we could talk about that after the show. Well, that is really cool. So can we talk about maybe some of the topics that in the past couple of years have really made a difference that would get people excited to go to your Unconference coming up in 2 weeks?
Well, it is kind of a geeky event, and it tends to have a little bit of a geek focus. Couple of topics that are we're going to talk about this go around, which had interest in previous sessions or Unconferences. One is drones. So we've had in previous sessions a gadget sort of session, but drones have seemed to take over sort of a topic all in and of itself, because drone technology has dropped in price. So there's a number of different kinds of commercial drones that you can get basically off the shelf that incorporates like a GoPro camera, or you can incorporate your own type of camera.
It's awesome.
The quad propeller, they're probably under the $1,000 or $1,500 range. So there's a lot of that technology that's becoming more and more available. The one that we had early on, we showed the quadcopter, the AR drone. And the AR drone is pretty neat, it has a camera. It's probably like one of the more inexpensive ones you can get into and actually do something with. But since then, there's some really kind of some pretty interesting drone technology that you can actually buy, right? And what you're seeing now is that you're seeing a lot of people flying over surf spots or at sort of natural scenery and taking some pretty nice aerial shots of that area with a drone and a camera. Now, the thing that is really making it kind of an important topic right now is that the FAA has basically limited drone use to hobbyists. So you have to be doing it in a totally non-commercial hobbyist mode. Now, there's all kinds of applications for things like, doing, let's say, aerial shots, if you're doing surf meets, or you're doing like the Great Aloha Run or something. I mean, you could take some pretty cool shots, but you can't sell it to anybody. Another one that has a great application is things like doing an aerial view of real estate, so that if real estate agents, they are trying to sell a property.
Modern Family. Didn't you see the new episode?
Which one?
He was Modern Family, the TV show. Oh yeah, he's the real estate agent. He goes over and spies on his kid using his real estate drone. Yeah.
So but the thing is, you can't sell that, right? So you have to be just doing it as a hobby. Okay, so the FAA restricts that use of a drone, and now because it's so kind of pervasive, it's so easy to get, that there's more and more people buying it, and there's more and more applications that are coming up, and there's also economic opportunity, right? You can build a business around doing some of these aerial shots. So now I think the market is sort of pushing on the regulation and pushing to see whether or not regulations and policy can change to accommodate the varied applications that could come out of using a drone. So that's one of the topics that we will talk about. I mean, that's one of the things on the list. Another one that we've got on the list this year, which seems to have a little bit of interest amongst some of the geeks, is the idea of cryptocurrency. So
like Bitcoin.
Yeah, Bitcoin. So we've actually had a couple of discussions about it on the radio, and there's Bitcoin, and there's actually probably about a dozen of them. The ones that I'm familiar with is Bitcoin and Dogecoin, because some people that I know have been either donating Bitcoin to me or tipping me with Dogecoin. And this cryptocurrency is a way that I could give you some of this cryptocurrency, right? I can just, and there's no intermediary, right? There's no bank in the middle, unless you at some point in time want to cash it in for some money. So there's some interesting,
it's like poker chips, yeah.
Yeah, like transactional, but it's all done on the web, and it's all done via the ability for this sort of algorithm to mine for coins, right? So how did I get my coin? Well, in my case, I didn't get a lot of coin. I got like 200ths of a Bitcoin, right?
200ths.
200ths of a Bitcoin, which amounts to about $20.
$20 is not bad. It's a pizza.
Yeah.
That's what the first Bitcoins was used for, to buy a pizza.
Right.
And now the first woman from Hawaii is going to be flying.
Well, so what happened was Richard Branson from Virgin Galactic put a seat on one of the flights that he's going to have to the moon, and said, you can buy a seat with Bitcoin. And it just turns out that a woman from Hawaii used her Bitcoin to buy that seat. So that got into the news. That was kind of interesting. And then, so there's all kinds of interesting things that you can do to transact if you want to trade in Bitcoin. Now, there's only supposedly, well, I understand there's only 21 million Bitcoins. You can that's the maximum that you can actually get. And then, several countries have acknowledged the ability to have recognized Bitcoin. So we saw, sort of this fluctuation, but it actually went up as far as, I think, almost like $1,000 for a Bitcoin. But lately, it's sort of dropped down. So it's
good time to buy.
Yeah, it might be a good time to buy. So we invited a couple people that have started something up called Bitcoin Hawaii. And we're going to have a session on Bitcoin. People are interested in what is a cryptocurrency. There's a chance to talk to some experts and find out what's going on.
Well, before we jump to a break, can we repeat the website for Unconferenz?
Sure, it's.
There we go.
Oh yeah.
We got our little. There you go.
Unconferenz with a Z, so that's.
Makes it cooler.
CONFERENZ with a Z.
Unconferenz.com. .com and
all the sites that I've talked about, whether it's the registration or the idea site or any of the other, like we can talk maybe later on about the Ignite session that we're going to do, but that's all there. So you just got to go and look for stuff.
Well, let's talk about open data and the Civic Accelerator.
Sure.
That's next, but right now we got to run to a quick break.
Okay.
So those of you watching, thanks for tuning in. You're watching Think Tech, and we'll be right back after this break.
Aloha, I'm Jay Fidel of Think Tech. We have some news for you. In addition to our Think Tech TV show and our Asia in Review show on Olelo 54, as of January 1st, we're adding Community Matters to play also 2 hours a week. Check out thinktechhawaii.com for the specific times of each of these shows. We hope you enjoy all three. Mahalo, I'm Jay Fidel.
Aloha, I'm Maria Kashem of Think Tech Hawaii, and I want to tell you about our Think Tech talk shows. If you didn't know it, Think Tech streams video and audio for all of its shows live on the internet from 2 to 5 p.m. every weekday afternoon, and we replay them all night long on ustream.tv. Visit thinktechhawaii.com for our live stream and YouTube links. Raise your awareness on Think Tech. I'm Maria Kashem, and I'll see you.
We're back, we're live, and you're watching Next Big Thing. I'm your host, Attila. With us today in the studio is Burt Lum. He's a fellow broadcaster and a tech expert, and we're talking about Unconferenz, and now we're going to talk a little bit more about some of his other projects, because believe it or not, he does more than one thing. So the next one, I really wanted to talk about Hawaii Open Data and why that's important. And I know a little bit about open data, and we talked about that before the show, but why don't you share what you're doing and maybe educate some of our listeners as to what open data is and how it works.
Well, so not to tell a long story, but I'll tell part of that long story.
Good stories are long stories.
Yeah, there was an opportunity to do something with the city. So the city started a digital initiative, and this is back in 2011. And in 2011, there was the guys that were involved, Gordon Bruce and Forrest Frizzell. They were starting up some ideas about bringing the city into like the 21st century. One of the things that they wanted to do was do something called a city camp, and a city camp, just like I mentioned, food camp and bar camp, was an unconference, but around the idea of city issues. Bring people together, mix them up with city officials and city workers, and try to sort of parse it out by topics of interest and see what would come out of that. So I got involved with helping them put that city camp on. One of the topics that was of great interest during the course of city camp, and city camp is something that is done across the country, and there's still city camps going on all over the U.S., is to bring some tech folks to look at what kinds of data is being made available by the government so that they could build some applications based on that data. So I'll give you an example. Back in 2011, there wasn't a whole lot of data sets that were being made easily accessible by the city. But one of the data sets that was being made pretty regularly and on a very almost near live basis was bus data. So if you think about it, you have a feed of data, and this feed is often called an API, Application Programming Interface. And this feed is easily accessible. It's published. You can go to the website and go look at the bus API. So after the city camp, one of the things obviously that came out of the city camp was, where's all the data? And if there isn't any data, then what can people really work on? Well, okay, we understand that you got to walk before you run. So we continue to have discussions about what kinds of data could be made available. But since there was already some bus data, we had something called basically a civic hackathon. And this hackathon was, let's bring some people together, some programmers and developers, and let's try to see if they can build something based on some open data. Because bus data was the primary one, there was a couple of interesting apps that got built as a result of bus data. One was, at that time it didn't have a name, but it ultimately got adopted by the city and was called DABUS, D-A-B-U-S. And then another one called All Bus, which is ALLB.US. Okay, so one was like All Bus.
It's like delicious.
Yeah. So one was geared more for a mobile app. The other one was geared more for a web app. So after that happened, there was some effort was placed on finishing up the bus app, and it actually got published up to the Apple iTunes App Store, and that became, and probably still is to this date, one of the most popular city apps that is available free and gives you all the information that you ever wanted about your bus, right? So you can, depending on your location, it's geolocation, you can find out where the closest bus stop is, what bus you want to catch, if you want to go to a particular place, and where along the route is that bus. So you can tell, it'll tell you like it's 5 minutes away, or it's 2 minutes away, or it's like 30 seconds away. So So that's how we first sort of, for me at least, got kind of involved with the whole idea of open data and civic engagement and this sort of participatory environment for people to come together and build stuff. So that was also part of a year-long engagement in 2012 with an organization called Code for America. So Code for America came in and they have this sort of fellow program. So they go out and they solicit for fellows. They pick about 20 to 30 fellows, and then they assign 3 fellows per city that is one of the Code for America cities. And it just happened that in 2012, Honolulu became a Code for America city. So that was part of the evolution of open data in Hawaii. And then in 2012, we had a couple of events. We did an event called Geeks on the Bus to drive some adoption of the bus app. So that was kind of a fun thing. At the end of the year, we had an event called Honcelerator, HON.Celerator.org. So Honcelerator was based on building some applications around open data that was available on the open data portal on the city, which was data.honolulu.gov. And through the course of 2012, the state stood up an open data portal called data.hawaii.gov. So over the course of 2012, there were some activity that was happening by these portals becoming available, and there wasn't still a whole lot of data being published, but you could see movement, in government wanting to also make some of their data available. Fast forward 2013 comes rolling around. There's an opportunity because we have some new leadership. We have Sunny Bagawalia coming in, and he's was the CIO at the state of Hawaii. He's now kind of moved on to the office of the governor. But in late 2012, early 2013, he was really behind doing more open government, transparencies, civic engagement. So I felt that there was a sort of environment and a overall attitude of support for the potential for an open data bill. So I helped draft an open data bill for the state of Hawaii that got introduced. It got introduced on the Senate side as well as the House. And so we had an open data bill that was getting heard. And we were successful in passing the open data bill.
Really?
So it's now Act 263. So if you go out and Google Act 263,
that's you.
State of Hawaii, that's the open data bill on the state side. So, it's interesting because when you work.
High five, by the way.
Oh, high five.
Good job.
Yeah. So if you do policy work, it's very interesting. I think everybody should try to adopt the bill and go and try to pass it through legislation. You can walk the hallways and meet the legislators and find out what it takes to actually pass a bill. Now, I'll have to admit, when the session ended, which was like, I guess it was like in May, I kind of got withdrawals because I miss going to the Capitol and I miss walking around and talking about my bill. So I figured, well, what the heck? I'll go pass a bill in the city and county. So
how hard could it be, right?
Yeah, how hard it could be? I already did one for the state. Let's do one for the city and county. So you have to find somebody that's going to help champion your bill. On the state side. We had Representative Tsuchi introduced it on the representative side, and Representative McKelvey was also very supportive. We had Senator Wakai on the Senate side introduce it on the state legislature. On the city and county side, you have to find a city council person that will help introduce the language. So Councilmember Carol Fukunaga introduced it on for the city council. So city council, it gets its first reading, second reading. It gets read in the different special committees that that in her committee it was the public safety and economic development. So it gets heard there. So in each hearing, it gets presented. If anybody wants to do testimony, they can go up and do testimony. If there are any objections, the objections get brought up during that hearing. And it went through, it's a little longer process than the state side, because the state side is really between the session, right? It's between middle of January and May. But then when you go to the city council, oftentimes their meetings don't happen for a month, right? So it starts off in August and September and November, September, October, November. So there's each month goes by, and it gets heard in a committee, but it just takes that kind of a period of time to get it scheduled. So we got it scheduled, and then so the council did a full vote. It passed, I think, back in November, and Mayor Caldwell signed it. So it's now an ordinance, 1339. So it's a bill. It's official. It's on the books.
Wow, victory number 2.
Yeah.
Are you having withdrawals again?
I got my hands full.
You got your hands full. Well, that brings us probably to Civic Accelerator. That relates to that. Right?
Sure, right. So there's some common ground between things like Unconferenz and these sort of collaborative environments and stuff that we've done with, let's say, City Camp and some of these sort of hackathon events. And what has evolved over the course of that 2012 and 2013 is that there's more data being made available. So, and there are departments that have a pretty good sense of the data, and they've been good at making that data available. Okay, one of the groups that has published a good amount of data and was very excited about, creating some applications around that data is campaign spending. Now that's campaign spending, and as we all know, there's an election coming up, and what all the elected or people that are running, the candidates that are running, they all have donations that are being made to their campaign, and all those donations need to be recorded, and all that data is actually published and available on data.hawaii.gov. But if you or I were to go to data.hawaii.gov and look at that data, it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Because it's hard for the human brain to look at a spreadsheet and say, "Oh, I can figure out what what this means."
You want a pretty chart.
You want pretty charts. You want visualizations. You want somebody to help you tell that story about what that data means.
By the way, the new side note, the new Google Charting API, fantastic. Have you played with it?
No, not personally.
Oh, it is great.
Yeah.
I've been using.
There's a tool set called D3. I don't know if that's a visualization tool.
No, I'm a DBA, so I know exactly what you're trying to do. Check out the new Google tools. Anyone watching, check out the new Google charting tools. They're fantastic. You can get like $1,000 tool sets just pretty much for free.
Yeah. And there's some so there's people in the community that are visualization guys, they're graphing guys, or they're people that maybe I can get you to be a part of a team. So
I love data. It's like the grosser the better. Yeah.
We'll talk more. So the program that the project that we're working on now is called Civic Accelerator, and if anybody out there is interested in checking it out, it's civic.accelerator.org.
Accelerator is
CELERTOR. And if you go to that site, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build applications, build websites, do visualizations, do something that helps tell a story about this data. Now, what's really kind of cool is that if you get citizen developers and programmers, they're inclined to look at that data from a citizen perspective. So typical kind of a view that I might want to look for is, okay, so I live in Pro City. I want to know who's running for the different races in Pro City. You might have a city council member running, which we do because there's going to be some people shuffling around because of all the people that are running. So there's a city council member that's running. there's representatives, there's senators, there's governor. There's a bunch of people that are running, and if you wanted to put a let's say a dashboard together, you would like it to say, well, let me put in my street address or maybe my zip code, and it could tell you like who's running in your geography, in your area. And then if we can bring some of this data together from campaign spending, which they have a wealth of data and it's all been published, we can look at, well, who's donating to that candidate's campaign.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah.
We actually wrote an app similar to that, which looks at crime statistics in your neighborhood. So you can put in, you put in your address, and then boom, everything that's come up in the past couple of months shows up. But we're actually out of time. As much as I love talking about this, we have to wrap it up.
Oh, geez, you said I could have like 2 hours.
Well, we can go off camera and talk for another couple hours at Starbucks. How does that sound? But I'd love to do that. So thank you so much, Burt, for coming on. I really appreciate it. Yeah. And we should do this again sometime.
Sure. I'd be happy to.
Of course, for those of you who missed any part of the show, you can always hit the rewind button. But of course, keep tuning in to thinktechhawaii.com. We have lots of shows throughout the week. And of course, be sure to tune in next Friday for Next Big Thing. I'm your host, Attila. See ya.